You guys, we have William Yeske on the podcast today. How are you?
Doing great.
Doing great. So, you're an author. I actually finished your book last night. You are the author of Damn the Valley with a whole bunch of First Platoon, Bravo Company, second
It's
508. Is that how
wordy. It's wordy.
it's
Yeah.
wordy, about as wordy as the book is for sure.
It's
But it was
basically, if you wanted to put it essentially down to it's 28 guys in the middle of nowhere on a combat outpost for the
yeah,
most part.
it was it was phenomenal. So I know you kind of glossed over it in the book, but what got you to write it? Because I know you had mentioned in the book somebody else was writing on your guys' experiences. So what made you decide to take that leap to get this going?
There's a little bit of a combination of stuff going on there. You have sort of a perfect storm thing, but there was back when we were leaving for a patrol on one of the patrols out there, there was one of the squad leaders, Sergeant Robert Muscle, who actually said something. He spoke it into existence pretty much because he was joking around and he's like, 10 years from now, we're going to see a book with Yeske's name on the cover about everything going on here. And I'm like, dude, there's no way. I don't want to write this. No, it's not going to happen. And it did. It took someone else writing a book by the title Bravo Company, actually, by Ben Kessling.
Mm-hmm.
And, I even interviewed for that end of things, but there was always this voice in the back of my head saying, hey man, like you should write down your stuff. You should write these
Mm-hmm.
memories down. They're important and everything. And it wasn't until, when I had gotten word that this other guy was writing the book and I interviewed with him and everything, I was kind of taking that easy road. Is I thought to myself, this is great. Someone's going to present our story and it's going to be, what better than somebody that a professional journalist. He's also a combat Marine. Um, he's going to get it.
Right.
And a lot of the guys, they feel that, they afterwards, after it came out and everything, and it was sort of as this thing was coming to market, to where the rumblings of some of the guys just got louder and louder, to where they were, you know, I don't have a good feeling about this. I don't think our story was presented right. It should have been one of us. And I actually called the author and I was like, hey man, like I'm hearing this stuff from the guys and I don't want to seem like I'm piggybacking off of your work or when you've heard my story. Do you think it holds any merit? I don't want to be that guy, but it kind of seems like this is where this is headed. And he actually encouraged me. He's like, no, absolutely. Every one of these stories deserves a place out there. Put it
Right.
down, get it started, you know. And he was super supportive in that. And sure enough, his book came out, and there's a lot of guys that just they felt marginalized. They felt their story wasn't told. They felt because it wasn't someone that was there. So really, that's what spun this thing up, was something to put the actions that these guys did out there in what essentially was hell. I mean, we had a
Yeah.
52% casualty rate, but it's sort of after this thing published and getting feedback from guys, a lot of these stories and a lot of this stuff, maybe not as condensed as what we had within that year, but a lot of the same stuff is the things that a lot of these other guys faced on the battlefield, whether conventional army or special forces, ODAs, a lot of these same scenarios with these landmines and with this type of adversity that we faced out there. And especially the veteran mental health side of things, we're all struggling out there with this. And this story just goes across the board with some of the things that these guys face.
Right. Yeah, and before we like really dive into a lot of the things that you had put in the book, I kind of had more like a random question because you didn't quite because you went over like your career a little bit. That was kind of like the
Mm-hmm.
gloss over. But did you ever actually get into special forces, or did your career just go in another direction?
So it ended up where I was in the pipeline for 2 years. And
Mm,
right at the very end there, uh, you know, booted out. I know there's just different situations that were involved to where,
mm-hmm.
quite honestly, I probably should have had that second look at, but you know what? Life didn't go that way. And I went over to another side of special operations in the civil affairs side, and then got booted from there for being too aggressive, and ended up back in regular army the last 8 months, right back where I started in the
I'm sorry,
82nd.
there's such a
So
thing as too aggressive in the military. Like, pause.
apparently,
Okay, that's new. But hey, so obviously, just as kind of a PSA to everyone out there, we're going to be talking some very, very heavy topics. There are some very heavy and graphic topics in this book. So just proceed with caution. If this is an episode that you need to skip because your mental health just can't handle that, I'm not going to be offended.
yeah.
But so this is your content trigger whatever warning. Proceed with caution before we dive into all of this because
Well,
it's going to get heavy for a second.
and to put that with that there too is really honestly, I designed some of this book to be that way of facing some of those traumas, because there have
Mm-hmm.
been guys and family members that have come back and been like, I had to put the book down a few times while reading this. So I mean, yes, it is triggering.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and at the same time, like, I mean, if it's something that someone feels they can't handle, then don't tackle that,
Right.
because it can set you, it has triggers in there. It has stuff to where there was guys that came back saying they were getting smells, like olfactory senses were being stimulated during
Mm-hmm.
reading this, to where they were getting smells from the battlefield during that. So, I mean, some of this does bring these guys right back to that. Um, and it's a good way in facing the trauma, but it's in a bad way if you are not prepared to face that, or if it catches you off guard. No, you're absolutely right. Like, you have
Right.
to be ready to read something like this.
Yeah, it is. So to just dive into it, this book is incredibly real on the realities of war,
Yeah.
basically. So how was it for you writing these experiences and even getting guys that you fought with to relive their experiences, because it's not just your perspectives in here. You had some of your comrades writing their perspectives in for added
Mm-hmm.
context on certain battles, certain attacks, stuff like that. So how was that mentally for you to go back there?
So I had always thought that a lot of it hadn't affected me because I'd always been able to talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
And really, the big part there was that I could talk about it because I had never really processed it. Like, in writing this, that was where I slowed down enough to start realizing, I mean, oof, that chapter in there about Jason Johnston in there, I don't think there was a moment that I wasn't in tears writing it.
I think that was
Um,
one of the rougher points to read. Absolutely.
oh yeah, like there's I can't remember what podcast I was on, but they were like, "Can you read this chapter?" I'd given them 3 chapters or something. They asked for some excerpts, and they asked if I could read, that one. And I'm like,
Nope.
I'm sorry, like there's no way I can read that right now. I'm like, I'm literally
No.
not ready to do that yet. Um, and yeah, I mean, even just picking it up and reading it and going through it, I'll right now, you can hear it. I'm teared
Yeah,
up,
I that
just
was
thinking about some of the severity of, and what it's done along the way to some of those other guys and how it's affected them. But going through the process of writing it was really a good thing, because some of those traumatic moments and stuff, I've had guys like, there's ones like the one with Johnston that's going to stay with me no matter what. It happened, and
absolutely.
especially just due to the timing as well. The day after Christmas, December 26th, 2009. But when people are like, how does that affect your holidays and stuff, it's a beautiful thing, because it drives home just how special your time is, here and now,
Yeah.
and with the people that are around you. And I wouldn't trade that experience for the world, just because of, it shapes you, who you are and what you do, and like what I'm doing now as well. And with a lot of the other guys and stuff there, I know for myself, like I said, it was good for me in the way of the processing it.
Hmm.
And portions of that are really have kind of disappeared from my stories. And somebody pointed it out, and I was like, man, I literally forgot I even put that in the book. And it's because some of that stuff is my mind just went, hey, you're at peace with that now. You know, you've
Hmm.
worked through this, through this particular process. And that's how it's helped out some of these guys as well, is just one in particular, you know, in talking with him when we got on the phone, he got on and was just like, man, you know, I've really been dreading this call. And I'm like, I told him right off the bat, I'm like, dude, we can just talk, man. We don't have to talk about back then. I'm just happy to hear from you.
Right.
And eventually we did end up going down that road. And I can't remember, it's 3, 4 hours later, you know, he's talking with me. He's like, you know, I'm really glad we talked, man. He's like, I wasn't going to call. He's like, to be honest with you, like 10 minutes before, I was really, it's, it was a struggle to call you that last 10 minutes. And I didn't know what I was going to do. He's like, but I'm glad I did because I feel like a burden's been lifted, you know, and really, it's like we carry each other through this type of thing. And that's been one of the most rewarding things for me. And what I see across the board with a lot of these guys is that that peer-to-peer connection that they once had within the military that sort of disappears and dissolves once you leave,
Hmm.
it's still there for you, but you do have to reach back out and reconnect. A lot of us just, we lose our way, or we lose our, not our way, but our, we lose that connection between us when we leave.
Right.
And really that's something we should foster throughout and beyond, you know, because you're really tied to those people that you've been through these traumas with, and you're
Right.
stronger together than isolated and apart.
No, absolutely. So, I was obviously doing my homework on you with reading and stuff like that. You had mentioned in a couple of different podcasts that some guys just fell off the map. Is that like pretty common, especially when it comes to military or like just super traumatic combat deployments?
You'll see that a lot. That's actually one of the, I would say, is probably the biggest, one of the biggest issues out there. Is we have that whole thing of when we're in the military, stow it in the bottom of your, you know, stow it for now. Right now is not the time. And then it
Hmm.
just kind of gets forgotten. You never come back and revisit. I know I talked with one of the guys about that with you know, on how the Native American tribes and stuff, when they were reintegrating back into the tribe after you know, a warrior party and stuff went out and guys were lost and, you know, the battles and stuff were fought, they would have, you know, a circle to where they would talk with each other and they would process these things that happened and they would mourn their dead and they would talk about the I guess the feats of victory on the battlefield and the sting of defeat. We don't really get that. And
No.
especially not with how the military does that now. And these guys, they've never processed this stuff. They've never, it's still there. You don't get over that. And when you've had a trauma like that, it's just a cyclical thing. It just keeps coming back
Hmm.
until you face it. So a lot of these guys they'll just self isolate and they'll be like, nobody really understands. Nobody's going to get it. And they're right. You know, a lot of
No,
society
they're
doesn't
absolutely correct.
understand this type of thing.
Nope, they
Um,
really don't.
but that's not really the right answer to hide away. You know, again, we're stronger together, and you have guys out there that care, and you have guys, you know, through the book project. One of the things that was done during COVID by one of the guys, I mentioned it in the book, David Huff, started doing
Hmm.
group Zoom chats with the guys after there was a jump in suicide rate and everything, and he kind of headed it off. But it was the fact that he cobbled it into this mastermind format to where we started going around, and we're very open with each other. We have no problem
Right.
because of everything we've experienced together. So a lot of these guys were okay about opening up about what they were facing, the issues in their life currently. Hey, I'm facing marital problems. Hey, I'm divorced and I really want to reconnect with my kids, or I'm trying to get this point in my job, or one of them in particular that comes to mind. I have this small business in Florida and I'm trying to move to that next level, you know, but I'm facing this adversity at home and I'm facing this adversity with training people. But to see other guys within this group, you know, hey, I've been there. and step up and help out. And more times than not, actually every single instance, I shouldn't even say more times than not, it really was, because there'd be stuff that would come out. Hey, I contacted him sideline about it because he wasn't, he didn't want to open up in the group right there. But I
Right.
was like, hey, talk to me on the side about it. And it's just so cool to see this community connecting that way and building off of each other that way. And again, I mean, I can't stress enough the fact of we're better together. We were in the military and we are outside of the military too. I guess warts and all, you could say.
Yep.
It's our it's sometimes those the negatives or the things that we're working through is what, I mean, it's what makes us, but it's just we're just people.
Right. So when you did the forward and then the afterword, was it a like no-brainer on who you were going to pick to do that, or were you kind of tossing names back and forth and just kind of figuring out who was actually going to be willing to write those?
There was a few. I So General David Petraeus was the first one that I reached out to, and it was really due to the fact that he was the ISAF commander at the time. I also reached out
Hmm.
to General Stanley McChrystal too. I didn't hear anything back from him, but I mean, I know they're both really busy people, as well
Hmm.
as the General Ben Hodges who wrote the forward there. But when it kind of boiled down on everything, it was really the fact that General Hodges has really been somebody, at least from my interaction and stuff with him, and he's been somebody he's got the men at the forefront, the arrow of responsibility, to coin the phrase of someone that was, our old battalion commander, Frank Genio, Lieutenant Commander or Lieutenant Colonel Genio, was that it's very easy to tell who's in it for the right reasons, who's in it for the guys, who's supporting the guys, because that arrow of responsibility, you look and say, all right, the person in leadership and in power, or is put in this leadership position, is he enabling the people under him? Or is this hey, it's all about me? Which direction is that pointed? And
Yeah.
that was something that I really found to be throughout his career and throughout things that, General Hodges has done, is that he's been about the guys, as well
Hmm.
as, I mean, for someone like General Petraeus to get back to me and like be the first person to endorse the book. I know he was the ISAF commander at the time, and I tried to initially reach out to everybody within that bubble who's
Hmm.
involved at the time. And it was pretty cool too, is getting that feedback and seeing, their eyes like, holy crap, I know exactly where you guys were. I know who you were. Or seeing pictures of, there's a chapter called the 1508 incident, to where General Hodges actually showed up and did the um, battlefield assessment afterwards, what had actually happened. And that, I mean, that was a terrible instance on things that happened. It was a complex attack that was started off, and I mean, ultimately 8 people killed that day.
Hmm.
And he knew exactly where this was and where we were. And it was actually something that was pretty personal to him, which is, I think, on how it came to be, where when I asked for the forward, he stepped up and was like, yeah, we can do that. Like, let's
Hmm.
make it happen.
Yeah. We'll get into that in a little bit, but the last part of that book just wrecked me. But you've also said in different podcasts that like your publisher and your editors were just like, you got to cut it off. So, because I feel like from reading this, there could have been another 600 pages, honestly. Like it could have been an
Easily.
encyclopedia. So, like when you were kind of cutting it down and cutting it down to size, like how did you manage to evaluate what stayed, what went, what was going to make the most impact, what was going to stick to, like, what was that whole, I guess, creative process for that?
I tried to keep most of it, just because of, and you just said it right there. There is so much. Like,
Oh,
I
yeah.
could literally get on here and talk war stories the entire time, and you would still have more in the book. And the crazy
Mm-hmm.
part is when you realize that this is first platoon only. This was literally the
Yeah.
vantage point for the most part of 28 guys out there on, combat outpost Johnston, um, which that's one of the military's things is they will rename little outposts and stuff to memorialize kind of guys that we lost in the area.
Hmm.
Um, but this is just a small vantage point. If I they really were just like, if I were to put everything down, you'd have an anthology. And quite
Yep.
honestly, that's where this is going. Not so much, I don't even care if I'm the one to write it or not. Like, it was the fact of inspiring other guys to come out and face these traumas themselves,
Hmm.
put the vantage point down from theirs. There needs to be a book from second platoon. There needs to be a book from third platoon out there, just because of the different instances, but also the things and the guys that really touches their hearts, that they, that's special to them. In this book, there's a story about a Sergeant Jason Spotted Horse, and he's
Hmm.
no longer with us. He's someone that he actually passed away due to Lou Gehrig, so ALS, from exposure to certain things that we were exposed to out within Afghanistan. And to be able to write a story down that only was shared between him and one other person, and to keep his memory alive that way, in a way that was uniquely, Sergeant Spotted Horse,
Hmm.
it's special. It's something really special. And, stuff like that, that was the stuff that stayed. And that was the stuff that I think anybody from first platoon can look at this book and be like, I remember that, and I
Right.
hold that near and dear. And for them to be able to, if they want to, share the view of what they experienced and the things that they experienced, side by side with these other guys within Afghanistan, with other people in their life. Cause I know that's been one of the things, some of the guys or some of the family members that have reached out and been like, I had no idea, but now I understand some of the things that I'm seeing, or some of the things on why they do the certain things they do, like hypervigilance is one of them.
Yeah.
Um, but really, that's, to go back to your question, is boiling it down. I tried to keep it mostly first platoon. There's other stories in there that they were just too dynamic or too important not to mention.
Right.
But yes, we could easily go back, and that's one of the things that through this I want to inspire other guys. And that's actually, there's a tail end of this year, October 2024, the guys from, I mentioned it in the book, but the guys from Charlie Company that were getting in firefights every other day that we would hear,
Yep.
they're actually through the same publisher. They're coming out. They have a book contract deal for, it's called The Devil's Playground by Andrew Bragg. And they're coming out with their book. There's guys from the 101st that are already talking with him. This ripple effect through this has already started. There's guys that are talking about putting their own stuff out there and all that. And I think it's a phenomenal thing to have been part of the start of. And I'm not going to say I was the start, because I wasn't. And really, quite honestly, it was that other book, Bravo Company, that kicked off a lot of this.
Right. Like you hit it on the head, I think. Like writing about different perspectives is going to help people that weren't in the military or family or friends to try to better understand what everybody went through,
Yeah.
because you're never going to truly fully understand all of it. You can read it and until it's burned into your retina, but you're never going to fully but at least some of it, and be like, oh, okay, this explains why XYZ. And we need to start talking about, I mean, we're starting to talk about it more, but we're not really talking about the like
There's
horrible
not
effects of
enough.
PTSD
Yeah. Yeah.
at all.
Yep.
Because I
Yep.
mean, I read the whole book, obviously, but those last 10 to 15 pages was just like, holy shit. Like, yeah, there was obviously, it's full of deep, dark, heavy shit throughout the book, but when you get to the point where you're talking about the mental health aspect,
Mm-hmm.
that was like somebody took the whole book and just, boom, you know? So, like, mental health with the transition and stuff, what was that like for you? Because obviously the I hate to say the
I'm gonna
military
give
is
you
like
one.
this,
No,
but
no,
they
this
are.
is, yeah, this is something that, and this particular story is not in the book.
Right.
But that last portion, and it's really because I didn't want that to, I wanted to try and keep it internal mostly to the 508,
Hmm.
family there and everything. But my last bit in the military, I was made a platoon sergeant. I had some guys under me and whatnot. But there was a kid that was leaving the military, and he had seen combat. He was a good kid and everything, but he had gotten into some trouble where he got busted down in rank, and he was passed time and grade to where what ends up happening is they separate you.
Hmm.
So he had 2 weeks left. Like normally when you have someone with 2 weeks left, they're man, guys are usually counting down the days to when they're gone when it comes down to that.
Hmm.
And there's nothing from this guy. He just always kind of just, there was signs. I'm like, something's off, man. Like, and it took me pulling him aside one night when he was on, staff duty. I was like, hey, what's going on, man? Like, you should be ecstatic. Oh no, it's everything's good and stuff. And I knew. It's like you have this, I guess, radar instilled in you that just it,
Hmm.
it knows. And I'm like, look, man, hey, I got some stuff to finish up in my office. Like, nobody's here. Why don't you just come back and we can shoot the shit? And we're talking, and sure enough, it just comes out. He starts going off about, he's in his last 2 weeks. He hasn't done anything to clear post because there's like a procedure you have to go through to turn in your gear and make sure you've taken these
Yep.
specific classes and you're out processed here. And they no longer have like I know this was one of the other things for me, but government travel card and, everything
Yep.
else. Don't use the government travel card, guys, please. That is a double-edged sword
I,
so bad. You can get a lot of
as a
trouble.
civilian, have several stories about the government travel card just because my husband's in the
Oh yeah.
military, and oh, I have had to deal
Oh,
with what
TTS
is it,
is.
SUDA, or I think it's SUDA. I don't know. It's the thing outside of the DTS.
Oh, so they
Mm-mm,
must have some sort of
mm-mm.
new system now because I don't even know what that one
I don't
is.
even know. I'm gonna get it wrong, so like sorry, but
No, it's all good.
it's like I can't remember. Or it's not SUDA. That has to do with making up days. Oh my god, somebody somebody tell me what one it is. But it's like something outside of the DTS. It has to do with the D. But yeah. No, I
Yeah, there's just
loathe
so many
government travel
crossover
cards.
bureaucracy there. It has to go through so many steps, and
Mm-hmm.
I get why, but I also am like the day and age we live in. Like, why is it so complicated when you have things to where you can break it down and put it into a system or an app even where it
And
would
why do
just
they
be
always
simple.
lose the receipts that you send in?
Hmm.
They're like, we don't
Right?
have that. I'm like, yes, you do. I
Yeah.
send it in.
3 times already now.
Yeah.
But so this guy is just, he starts spilling his guts on it. And it
Mm-hmm.
turns out that he was planning on taking his life. Like, and I mean, really, who knows? It could have been even that night, just gone home from it. And everybody, wife is at work, kids are at school. And who knows? Who knows
Mm-hmm.
when in his mind, but that these ideations and stuff would have played out. But judging from where he was at and where everything was at, it was probably just in the nick of time.
Yeah.
And I kind of was like, since the beginning of being in the military and like sort of I guess the initial command that I talked to, it was a little bit of a different atmosphere about that. They're like, I had always been under the impression that if it's somebody who's really truly made up their mind, that there's not much that's going to stop that.
Right.
But in talking with him, I just kind of was very real with him. And I said that I'm like, well, look, man, like you tell me the deal because, I can't fully stop that. But what I can do is I can be here for you and try to help you navigate the next step forward.
Mm-hmm.
Would you be willing, like, if I commit to that, would you be willing to like give it a shot?
Mm-hmm.
And he was like, sure. All right. I'm like, okay. I'm like, I'll be right back, man. Like, let me just hang tight. I'm going to go run over to first sergeant and see what I can do from here. Man, if it wasn't the total wrong answer that I got from him, he looked at me and he was like, well, he wasn't, this guy wasn't your guy, right? And I'm like, yeah, he wasn't. He's like, well, he's yours now. I'm like, okay, that's fine. He's like,
Yeah.
have him out of here in 2 weeks. He's a problem child. And I was like, blown away at the callousness, at what I had just heard. I couldn't even believe it. Like, I wanted to freaking throttle the guy right then and there. But I gave him the
Yeah.
Roger that. I about faced out of there, and I was like, I went back into the office. I'm like, hey man, come with me. We're going to see Sergeant Major.
Yeah.
And it was literally, I just walked straight down to battalion and was like, explain the situation. And I'm glad I did. I mean, from there, we got him the help that he needed, like immediately. Like, that was like, we just brought him straight down to the mental health clinic and started tackling it from there. Um, and thank God from there. I mean, we had a good success story from it. Not only did he not realize, just due to the cloud of everything that he was in that dark, depressive state that he was in,
Mm-hmm.
that the Army literally owed him, the next 2 years of pay. And he walked out of there with like $70,000+, as a nice little something to make that next step into the civilian side as that
Yeah.
buffer zone and whatnot. We got him the travel that he needed. We got him through, the process that he needed to get out processed from the military and stuff, but successfully. And I say
Yeah.
successfully because not only was he still alive, not only was he put back into a support system, like with family that he needed to be, but somebody listened, and that was just one of the biggest things is like, know the people around you and know that there's people
Mm-hmm.
out there that care about you.
Yeah, for sure. When you talked about it in the last, and you kind of are hitting it on the head, obviously, with how mental health and trauma is addressed as a whole, and that is the actual problem child, in my opinion,
Mm-hmm.
not the. So, what? I'm trying to figure out how to word this question,
It's okay.
but
I get it. It's a heavy thing that I mean,
it
it
is
really
like,
is.
obviously, I have a ton of respect for our military and what you guys all do, but it's a fucking problem with how veterans, and especially combat veterans, are just kind of swept under the rug. Like, you can't say, hey, I'm having a lot of issues dealing with the fucking trauma that I just
Mm-hmm.
experienced, where like I saw, one of my best friends get blown up, and then we have to like pretend like nothing happened the next day for the next 9 months, and then we come back and we're doing it all over again. And if you say anything about that, you're somehow blacklisted and this, that, and the third. And it's like, what are we doing?
Yeah. Yeah. Put them in a situation to where, I mean, and quite literally, and I talked about this in there to where, you know, it's not just that your friend was blown up,
Mm-hmm.
and is no longer with you guys, but then, you literally, there was an instance to where you have to recover the body and you're literally picking pieces of someone up, and I talked about, um, that one kid that he
Mm-hmm.
didn't even realize it because of the time of day it was and the sun had gone down and whatnot. But he literally slept on someone's leg thinking it was a tree limb, because of where it was in the orchard and
Yeah.
proximity to a tree. And then that next morning when the sun comes up and to realize that that was one of your friend's body parts that you just laid on all night.
Mm-hmm.
I know that that affects him, I mean, to the core,
Oh,
and
yeah.
that's something that doesn't go away, and facing that
No.
and stuff, but it's, what are you supposed to do about that? I
Yeah.
know that, but it also runs into problems that we're having as a society as well.
Mm-hmm.
It's, if you have someone who's not exposed, to challenges and stuff growing up, and then is into the military and exposed to something that extreme like that, um, nothing's been built in, and then you come back to a society to where, they can't really relate to that level of trauma,
Right.
and it's just it kind of gets shoved down. Like you were saying, it gets ignored. It gets marginalized or looked at to where people are like, well, I don't want to talk about this because I don't want to be looked at as, problem child, or someone with
Mm-hmm.
issues, or, you know, people, I could go on the list, people to
Yeah.
be, uh, scared for their kids to come over and have a sleepover with my kids or something, or, you know, you can just go down
Oh,
the laundry
absolutely.
list.
Well, and I from just from my experience of talking to, like, I've got several buddies that were in the military, and they were all, I was, they're going through it, and I'm like, why don't you talk to somebody? And they're like, because I won't be able to deploy.
Mm-hmm.
And at the
Or they'll lose their
time,
clearance. That's another big
yeah,
one. Yeah.
being deployed was kind of the whole point of being in.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like an identity, and it was like you were looked down on if you weren't able to deploy. And I'm just sitting here like, why are we treating the people assigned to keep us safe with just such like, oh no, you can handle it, you can handle it, you're fine,
Yeah.
don't talk
We've
about it.
trained you for this. Like, you
Yeah,
can't train
like
anybody
you
for
haven't
that.
trained, you've trained them to jump out of airplanes and to apply tourniquets. You have not trained them to go through 90% of the shit that's in this book.
Yeah.
I don't think anything prepares you for that.
No,
That
that
is,
was actually one of the things during the book launch event that I had I, it was such a surreal experience, and it was really cool to be able to talk to the current generation within that company. So, um, the book launch was held at the Airborne and Special Operations
mm-hmm,
Museum, mainly due to the fact that the flag that's on the cover of the book was recovered by one of the guys from Afghanistan, from the battlefield, and
yeah,
it's actually been entered within the DoD historical archives now. Um, you know, and it's preserved for perpetuity. So, like, the cover for this book, that's a real picture from the battlefield that one of the guys took. But not only that, but that flag is, you know, it's sitting there. It means something. It's significant to a lot of those guys, and it's something that, you know, I mean, their great grandkids could be brought in to see, which is, that's something special, you know, for a lot of them. Um, but in talking with those guys and talking with the new generation, that's one of the questions. Like, well, how do you prepare for combat? What's the best way to prepare for combat? And like, there, quite honestly, there is none. There's not
right.
any real preparing for. You can train as you fight, absolutely, and train hard. And they're definitely, that particular company is kind of the whipping horse, or not the company, but that battalion. It's been the whipping horse of the 82nd for a hot minute.
Yeah.
But in that adversity and what they kind of, you know, they have it a little bit harder than a lot of the other guys out
Mm-hmm.
there, is I told them, like, just be reassured, man, that that is actually an asset. You guys can put up with more. You have more resilience built into you than a lot of the other
Mm-hmm.
guys there, because these challenges and these hard times that they put out in front of you are really the best thing to prepare you for. Nothing really prepares you for combat,
No.
but instilling those muscle memories that when this stuff goes down and you know what to do, and taking away those different factors of, I guess, where you might have a freak out, or I even talk about it, you know, you don't know how someone's going to react when the bullets start flying. You know, one guy in particular that I would have never thought, you know, as soon as we started getting shot at coming across that orchard that one time, he's beelining it the other way, away from the bullets, you know, and
It's
it's just
human
like,
nature, I feel.
where did that come from? Right. Like, you just,
Right.
but you never know. You never know.
Yeah, you did talk about that a little bit, about guys that just burn out and we're like, I don't want to go out there. I don't want to go out there. And you had mentioned that it was either you or somebody else's perspective that they were just yelling at him like, nobody wants to fucking go out there, but we're going out. And it's like
Mm-hmm.
the only way to empathize and be like, yeah, dude, me too, but like we don't got a choice,
Yeah.
kind of thing.
Yeah. That's where I had to leave the names out of it, just because I'm not,
Oh, absolutely.
you know, well, I know exactly who you're talking about. It wasn't me. But it was, I know the patrol we were talking about and stuff.
Hmm.
And it was one later on in there to where we were getting replacements in, to where they're sending people out there because our casualty rates, the rate of loss was so high
Hmm.
that they were just sending new kids in. And I had read about this stuff before in, you know, Vietnam books and whatnot, and was like, yeah, don't bother getting to know them. You know, we had one in particular, first patrol out you stepped on a landmine. And to start thinking like that, I mean, it was the wrong answer to think about it that way. But at the same time, like, yeah, that is human nature. Like, why are you going to go walk around a minefield, for and I guess it's what really separates, what we were doing out there as opposed to, um, the other end of things is like, why are you sticking your neck out for other people like that? And it's really just, support of freedom.
Hmm.
There was a difference made out there. And that was actually one of the things until more recently. You don't always see it
Hmm.
and stuff, but one of the kids, one of the social media campaigns and stuff, I think it was actually the Reddit page, was I had posted something out there, in one of the villages that we operated in, and someone came back, hey, that was my hometown village. My family left there in 2012 and we're living in the States now and stuff, but I remember you guys. And I'm like, how real is this?
Right.
And I reached out, but had confirmation come back because he was describing exactly where we would meet and stuff, or where we would see these kids in the village. He was 10 years old at the time. And he's like, with you guys there and with you guys coming through, there was just a very different feel towards you guys and how you guys did things out there. And, we weren't scared of you guys. And it was pretty cool to see that end of it.
No, absolutely. So not to completely put you on the spot, and we can
No,
edit this out,
you
obviously,
can,
but
you can. It's okay.
how are you doing with like
Mm.
your mental health with all of this? Because obviously healing's not linear, and I know you processed a lot in the book, but you're still going to have your moments, your days. So how are you doing, and how are
Oh, yeah.
you like
I
navigating all
mean,
of that?
I even talked about, and I guess I'll kind of like, the easiest way to answer this one or to get into this one is to go into what I discuss in the book on some
Hmm.
of my behaviors and stuff. And that was,
Hmm.
I mean, I was high risk activities. I mean, you're talking coming back from work at 120 miles an hour on a
Yeah.
North Carolina back road, not caring what happened to me. I knew there was deer out there and stuff. And it took the fact of some other kid out there trying to follow me
Yeah.
and my irresponsible actions to almost kill someone. I mean, like, this kid ended up going off into the woods and, like, I mean, ping ponged off some trees.
I
This
can't
was,
believe he survived that, honestly. When I was reading that, I for sure
mm-hmm.
thought that you were going to be pulling a body out.
I, I thought so too. Like, when I stopped and I was like, oh my God. Um, the only reason that kid didn't die was the fact that he had a roll cage in that car. And even then it was still in as bad of a shape as it was. I don't know if I don't think I put that picture in the book, but I definitely put it on
No.
social media. It was a 350Z that was almost split in half. I mean, it was hit by a tree in the B pillar to where, um, again, like I said, if there was no roll cage in there, the tree would have just gone. It would have wrapped around the tree. It would have been all it. It
Right.
would have been done. Um, but realizing there was a problem, realizing that I had things to process, realizing that I had to break down and go, all right, you do need to go and see somebody about this. Um, and it's really, I mean, I still see people, I have the VA. I've been fortunate within the VA about that. I
Hmm.
mean, I have my primary psychologist and then I have, two others on board as well. One that's trauma specific and, another one, even though I don't use them in this capacity because I'm more on the holistic side, but I have a psychiatrist on that end, where I'm very intentional about what's happening. And I
Hmm.
try to stay mindful as to, what effect is this happening? Where are you at right now? Are you starting to get hyper vigilant? Are you starting to get these racing thoughts and stuff? Or are you starting to go into a depressive funk and stuff? And these are the things to watch for. Is this really, you have to hold yourself accountable, but then also, I talk to my wife about it and I'm like, look, I told her into getting into the book once I started realizing just how much was there. I guess that I hadn't processed myself. And I told her,
Right.
like, look, you know me best and stuff. Like, please, if you start to see changes and stuff in my behaviors and how I talk with you guys, or if I'm getting short with you guys or something, like, you gotta let me know. But like, let the people around you know, hey, I'm going through something right now, or I'm okay, or keep an eye out for me. Reach out every so often. Um, yeah, I
Yeah.
guess that's just some of the stuff that I tackle in the sessions, and it's really a lot of it is that self care and that self mindfulness, and it's not something that we address, I guess, as a society, and we kind of
Yeah.
shy away from that. It's we live in somewhere where our phones are in front of us all the time, where we're constantly being distracted. So it's important to come back and take an inventory of yourself. Like, spend 15 minutes by yourself, not on your phone, with your phone gone, like in your own thoughts for 15 minutes, and then come back. Because I'm telling you,
Right.
things are going to bubble to the surface.
Yeah. Read a book, touch some grass, like something, you
Yeah.
know. So what can we, I mean, I know everybody asks this question but I really mean it when I ask it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, what as a society can we be doing to help the mental health crisis with veterans? Like, who should we be calling people? Should we be writing? Like, what can we do? Because obviously it's gotten a little bit better, but
Mm-hmm.
it's not nearly where like veterans mental health needs to be, or even like current enlisted mental health. So what, as somebody who's been through it,
Yeah.
what can we be doing, even if it's just supporting, and you obviously touched on it like a couple minutes ago, but what can we be doing to support people that we know that have seen combat, or to even try and move things in a better direction to make mental health in the military way less stigmatized?
I mean, that is like, we
The
said it
million dollar
before. No,
question.
you said it before. Like, no, they shy away from talking about it, or they
They
stuff
do.
it down into the bag. So, I mean, it's really like the problem within the veteran community and veteran suicide. I don't think veteran suicide, like, there's so many people out there within society that are willing and open to helping. But I think that a lot of that is initially going to have to be kicked off by the veterans themselves. That a lot of the things that you hear come back are, they don't understand what I've been through, or how could anybody possibly understand it? And you're right. So it takes, where a clinician can treat trauma, and trauma acts across the board the same way, but for somebody to actually go and see that clinician is a battle in itself. So to be open about talking about it with your friends, and the fact of, like, with this, just being that open, forgive the pun here, but open book, to
Mm-hmm.
where, like, guys have reached out and been like, man, I can't believe you put some of this stuff in there. But at the same time, I'm glad you did, because I've seen some of these behaviors in myself and stuff. And it's getting them to open up about it, but talk about it themselves, among their peer community, among each other, but then going, have you talked to somebody about it? Or are you open to talking to somebody about it? Because it helped me in this way, and to really, I guess, encourage that open discourse about it. Among veterans, I know one of the things too is that I try to do, and that I've been doing more recently, is making myself available to different organizations and stuff that deal with that. I've just basically put an open thing out to Maryland Veterans Affairs Department, and I'm like, hey, you guys need somebody to talk about, mental health issues or veteran suicide and stuff. Like, keep me in mind. And I've already been speaking at some of these from the veterans' perspective, because a lot of them, there's people out there willing to help, and there's organizations out there willing to help, but to be open enough to put that veteran out there and see that perspective. They don't see that perspective a lot because we're very tight-lipped about it.
Right.
there's no reason to be. It's okay to talk about, you know? So, I mean, really, I think that that's destigmatizing it and
Right,
getting it out. Like,
exactly.
this is war. You're going to see that. And you're seeing this in conflicts all over the place. So, I mean, really, it's not just that this is, in an Afghanistan war book. Like, no, this is a book about combat, and it's
Hmm.
universal to the things that are happening now. You're going to be seeing, and see stuff from Ukraine coming back like this, from Israel, from, the multiple countries around the world that, like, really, quite honestly, like, it is now a global community.
Yeah.
And this type of thing, it is a global issue. It's a societal issue, and it's something that we need to stop shying away from.
Yeah, to touch on that, I was just thinking about that. Like there were no like cell phones and stuff. There were cell phones, obviously, but there wasn't really the presence of social media that much back in like 2010, 2011, 2012. So the
Mm-hmm.
things that we're seeing on Instagram now, and we're just like, oh my God, it was the same. I'm guessing the same shit, but you didn't have the ready access of a high quality camera phone to
Yeah.
document it. So
Yeah.
it's
Well,
like
and
these books are
seeing
the
some of this.
only.
Oof.
Sorry.
Oh no, no, I know. Like, I was just going into seeing the access of what some of these people can actually, these instances and stuff.
Yeah.
And I, man, in dealing with having posting in some of these forums and different stuff like that, but seeing some of what's posted out there and
Yeah.
seeing that, just, I mean, man, and I'm not even gonna mention which ones, but like seeing some of the Ukrainian and Russian war footage and some of the things that happen out there, but that you experience it, firsthand is one thing, but then also broadcasting this stuff out for everybody. Like, this is some brutal stuff.
It is.
There's no need, in my mind, for people to be exposed to that type of thing that casually. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, it's traumatic in
I
itself.
like.
Like, when you start thinking about that, like, hey, that was a person, man. Like,
Yeah.
why are you posting this type of thing? Is that, for likes? Are you trying to, or are you actually, like, is this some kind of documentary that I don't know. I don't know the mentality behind someone posting, the things of, like, footage of Ukrainian drones dropping ordnance on people, and, watching bodies just
Yeah.
become part of the landscape. It's, I don't get it. It's not entertainment. That's for sure.
No, it's not. And I'm sure that brings you back to a lot of shit you don't want to relive.
Yeah.
And
Nor
like,
should anybody, like, want to, I mean,
yeah.
I don't think anybody, where some people might have, they glorify war or something like that. It's not, I don't wish that on anybody, and
No.
nor do I think anybody should. It's something that I think is part of the human condition, I guess,
Hmm.
and it's unfortunate and it sucks. Um, but evil exists out there, and it does take someone to stand up to it. And unfortunately, you're going to have losses in between.
Yeah. And like I can understand wanting to show the realities of this because we all, especially over here, live in a bubble where we're not
Mm-hmm.
living in a war zone. We're
Yep.
not. We're not exposed to these things daily. But there was a point in time where I actually like thought about deleting Instagram off my phone for a minute because it was just so heavy. And me being somebody that absorbs a lot of those energies, it was
Mm-hmm.
way too much for me. Like my heart
Yeah.
was just shattered because I'm like, these people are living in these conditions and it's awful. And as much as I was like, I need to not be in my bubble, I wanted
Mm-hmm.
to be back in my bubble so goddamn bad. I was like, I don't know how people do this. Like it was a lot. It was a lot.
Yeah. And to have that empathy where you're feeling that, oof,
Yeah.
that is one thing that's lacking from our society as well. I mean, there
Hmm.
is a lack of empathy out there.
There really is. We just need to be kind in general.
Yeah.
And
People are just people,
yeah,
and it's, um, why do you have the right to crush that dream to just exist and to
Hmm.
have their own dream. Like what threat is that against you?
Exactly. Exactly. So, what is next for you for the book? I know that you had reached out and said that there was an audiobook that is
Oh
now
yeah.
out. So,
Yep, it just came
what
out
is next for
February
all of this?
27th.
Yeah.
Audiobook on the 27th. I haven't heard back from or I haven't heard from Netflix or Amazon or any of those guys yet,
Damn
but
it, not yet.
right. Um hey, you know what though? Like this is just through some of this and everything else is just this has been on this trajectory to where there's things that have happened during this that are just it's unexplainable.
Hmm.
It's unexplainable to and I'm just following it. I'm just following this, I guess, a slipstream, if you will, or something. I mean,
Hmm.
you ask what's next. So we have Damn the Valley is out. I wrote a book 5 years ago that has to deal with, uh, my particular military transition experience into the civilian world. And 5 years ago, when I wrote this stuff down, I was, this is, nobody's ever going to read this. No, I'm
They might.
nobody.
They might now.
And yeah, so it's almost like now I'm like, oh wow, I just didn't see the pattern here. I didn't know what was happening there. And again, it's being open. It's being open to what's around you. It's following that resonance and stuff.
Hmm.
So one of the things I've been tackling is down the road of the Veterans Transition Assistance Program, getting the other guys in touch, getting the other guys talking. These other books that they have coming out as well. And yeah, I mean, really, it's just following the flow within all of this. It's not like there's this book there. There's the other few books. I have the marketing agency side of things, and it's a lot of it's just been by with and through.
Hmm.
I don't know where it's fully headed, but I will say that I had an experience to where I got to see the movie credits, so it's coming.
That's
It's coming.
exciting.
That's a conversation for a whole nother time.
Oh yeah. I was just gonna say if that book about your transition ever comes out, like I would love to have you back because I feel like that's an entirely whole new podcast episode on all of
Oh,
that
absolutely
for
no.
sure.
I'd love to share the story for
Oh,
sure.
for sure. So, where can we find the book?
All right. So, I mean, you can get it all your normal Amazon, Barnes and Noble, bookshop.org is a good one. But you also have damnthevalleybook.com, which
Hmm.
has links to all those, but it also has, you can get author signed copies through there. And the difference there is that for every 2 author signed copies that I sell, I get, it pays for a copy for one of the other guys, so it's essentially crowdsourcing. And I'm trying to get copies of this thing to the, 150 or so guys that were there
Right.
in hand for them. It's really because that's who this has been all about. It's really been about them.
Hmm. Yeah. So, jeez,
Yeah.
this be the book, guys. She pretty.
Hey.
I did. I did actually read it. I swear, and obviously, with all of our chats or whatever. But it's such an incredible book. It's definitely going to take you some time to read. It's 197 pages of
Is it
actual.
197?
Yeah, I think it's 197 of like the actual content minus the glossary, which was very helpful. If you weren't already, let me see.
Not to
Oh
mention
no,
the
I'm
rank
sorry. Yeah, the
description in
afterword
there.
is 190. Yeah, 197 pages. It is probably the heaviest 197 pages I've ever read in my life, but it was beyond worth it. And there's my little book review.
I was going to say that
So
is some kind words there. Thank you. I
look,
really,
I
no, I
left
do.
you
I
5 stars
appreciate
on
that.
Goodreads because I'm a book talk girly, so I love my
Oh,
Goodreads.
no, thank
But
you. And that is one of the biggest things to help too is, I mean, reviews these days are
yeah,
huge,
yeah, no, it was
huge.
incredible, and I am so thankful that you're taking the time and came on and chatted with me about all this because I know this isn't like some fun little anecdotal story about, a group of friends. So
Well, I
it takes
mean,
a lot and I appreciate it so much.
I appreciate what you're doing out there. I mean, talking about this stuff and like talking about mental health issues, but in the unvarnished way that you've been doing and stuff is it's big. It's huge. And I wish there was more people out there doing it like that. So thank you.
No,
And
thank
thank you for
you.
having me on.
Yeah, no, thank you so much. This has been incredible.
Humbled.